Now, for a sport known for its big prize money, massive cultural influence, pushing the limits of human physicality, and even its famously adorable traditions, tennis can be brutal for the players on the court.
Skills was coming. Djokovic cracks.
Tennis is one of the few global sports where an athlete is entirely alone for hours. No teammate to rotate in, no physical contact with the opponent, and barely a word from the coaches. And even today, support is tightly restricted. Tennis legend Andre Agassi, in his book Open, described tennis as the closest thing to solitary confinement. Tennis players have spoken about this isolation for years.
You pick up your bag and you go into center court and it's like you're on your own.
Just feel generally very, very alone and very lonely. I don't know.
Now, if this solitude existed only during the match, this wouldn't be a story worth telling. But behind this billion-dollar sport is a system that makes this isolation worse. One that doesn't really make it to the broadcast, but it defines most of the player's life. Which really begs the question, why is tennis designed to leave players isolated? And why does such a major sport continue to thrive because of it? Now, the comparison of tennis to the gladiator games of the Roman Empire isn't new. It's a gladiator sport by design. Before the Open era began in 1968, professional tennis was nomadic. Top players who turned professional to earn good money were banned from playing in any kind of Grand Slams and forced into something called barnstorming tours. Instead of a 128-player draw like today, these tours often featured just 2 or 4 big names, playing each other in different cities night after night. They were a one-man traveling carnival, constantly on the move, far from home and family. The sport bred a culture of isolation and self-containment from the very beginning. The big transition came in 1968 when the Open era merged these two lonely worlds into one modern game. Tennis became richer, more global, more glamorous. But the essence of the lonely professional remained. The sport modernized its look, brand partnerships, broadcast deals, huge prize money, but kept the same core philosophy, self-reliance above everything else.
I didn't play Australia because I wanted something normal, and that's called Christmas. And that's called New Year's.
Now, to understand why tennis feels this lonely, we have to look away from the court and at how the sport actually treats its players. At the top level, men play under the ATP and women under WTA. They run the tours and the rankings, but the 4 Grand Slams operate independently, setting their own rules and reward systems. In most major sports, athletes are partners in the ecosystem. They sign long-term contracts, they earn fixed salaries. Tennis chooses to not work that way. So let's draw a comparison to understand this a little bit better. This is a professional footballer called Dan Bentley. He's the backup goalkeeper in the Premier League playing for Wolverhampton Wanderers. He hasn't played a single minute this season, yet his annual fixed salary is around $1.4 million. Now on the other hand, this is Carousel, a professional tennis player ranked just outside the top 300. In 2025, he earned just over $38,000 in prize money. Now here's the key difference. Dan Bentley has a club behind him. Carousel does not. There are no salaries, no long-term contracts, no guaranteed income. Tennis players fund their entire careers themselves. Flights, hotels, coaches, physios, rehab. For most lower-ranked players, justifying those costs against minimal earnings becomes nearly impossible. And if you get injured, you lose income, you lose ranking. And most importantly, you lose access to tournaments that offer higher prize money.
I didn't know how I was going to pay my bills. I told my coach, there were times like, hey, I can't pay you, or I can't pay for training this week, or can you pay for your flight? And then, I got you when we get to the slam and when we get to the bigger tournament.
Tennis looks like a major global sport, but structurally, it works like freelance labor. You're only as secured as the last point you played. The truth is, the biggest names in the sport aren't blind to this. Novak Djokovic co-founded the Professional Tennis Players Association called the PTPA. It's a player-only body pushing for fairer revenue sharing, basic protections, and a real voice for the players, especially outside the elite.
The media is communicating how much does a Grand Slam champion win constantly, rather than the players that are barely making a living from tennis.
Now, these steps are slow in a fairly old system that exists in the world of tennis, but they are proof that beneath the luxury and spectacle, there's a deeper problem that the sport can no longer ignore. And when a sport is built this way, where most of the success sits at the very top, the question becomes unavoidable. Where does all the money go? Tennis doesn't have a money problem. Compared to other individual sports, it sits right at the top in revenue. The 4 Grand Slams generate enormous income: broadcast deals, luxury sponsorships, ticket sales. In fact, tennis has some of the most expensive match tickets in global sport. The problem is how little of it reaches the players, and most of that is concentrated at the very top. This is why tennis doesn't really have a middle class. You're either comfortable at the top or barely surviving anywhere below. Now, the system doesn't really look broken until you compare it to other sports. There was a time when English football looked very different. Players were underpaid, the sport was local. But as global interest exploded, football evolved. Broadcast rights transformed English football into the Premier League that it is today. And at the center of that evolution was the sport's most valuable asset, the players. As revenues grew, so did the player power. Today, players in the top football leagues receive close to 50% of total revenue. Basketball and other team sports sit in the similar range. Tennis, however, never made that shift because it believed that the game is different.
The amount of players that live from this sport, that is the third most global sport, we talked about it earlier, is around 400. So all the professional players around the world, you have less than 500 players that live from this sport.
Now, as it seems, tennis is caught between tradition and what actually makes sense for the players in the modern world. You can see that tension most clearly in how tennis is watched today. The sport struggles to stay relevant for the younger audience. New formats, novel broadcasts, surface level innovation. The core problem remains untouched. Without investing in players, innovation becomes cosmetic. So maybe the question isn't why tennis players feel so lonely. Maybe it's what that loneliness does for us. Ancient Rome didn't just have gladiators, it had crowds. People who came for the skill, the courage, the spectacle, but stayed to watch suffering up close. Tennis gives us inspiration, it gives us beauty, but it also packages isolation as entertainment, pain as drama, breakdown as spectacle. And maybe that's the uncomfortable truth, that tennis doesn't just tolerate loneliness, it sells it, and we're the ones watching. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe. There's a lot in the works. I'm working on many stories from the world of sports. Make sure not to miss them, and I'll see you next time.